What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., we think, and Claudia Bellafato holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for everybody, albeit a likely chaotic one. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. The best of GoJo and Golic, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio here. Claudia, who do we got coming up today?
Hopefully, Senior, hopefully he can stay with us. We also have Jokic. Did they get it right? He wins his third MVP in 4 seasons. A kiss response. Oh, I hope so. Jason Fitz reacts to GoJo's track. And Cup Crazy. Sara Civian brings her NHL expertise to the show. I can't wait to ask her about that Bruins-Panthers battle. But GoJo first. You had a little trip to Dodgers Stadium yesterday, and they got a win for you over the Marlins. How was it?
It was great, and I do want to get to that, but I feel like first we need to do a wellness check on my father right now because in the lead up to this show, we were all getting set to do it without my dad, who's constantly been, we do Senior versus the internet on this show, but my dad's actual war versus the internet has now led him to looking like a hostage video over in the media conference room at the hotel near his house. So I haven't even gotten to speak to Dad pre-show yet at this point, but I know the look on his face of exasperation. I've seen it all too well when my brother's progress reports used to come out in high school. So Dad, how are you holding up over there currently?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is our sound check right now.
Listen, yeah. So I feel like I should be holding up a newspaper with the date on it. Like you said, those hostage videos. I mean, it's, I don't know what to say. I'm the least technologically sound person of our group, easily. I have a nice system in my house, and every now and then the internet isn't good. We try and fix it. So I just had a guy come over the other day, and he put in this thing that says, if you ever have an internet problem, it will automatically reboot for you. Guess what didn't happen today? It didn't happen. So there's already been a really nice text sent to that person at 4:30 a.m. out here, Arizona time, to say, your blank doesn't work. So we'll see what kind of response we get to that. I try and be, I do lose my patience quickly at times, but I try and be nice to the people who are trying to help me. But there are times when you start to get fed up. You know, you start to reach that point of, you keep saying this is going to be better. You keep saying, and it's not. And so we'll see. We'll see. You know what? Forget that. People are if they're on their way to the work, they don't want to hear somebody else having problems. They're going to go to work and have problems of their own. Mike, I want to talk about that freaking dessert that you had at Dodger Stadium that looked absolutely fantastic as you watched Shohei Ohtani go 0 for 4 and strike out twice.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. This was an interesting phenomenon yesterday going to the Dodgers game because in the day and age of the pitch clock, that game I think was over just sub 2 hours. It flew by. I stood in line for that ice cream, and it was the Churro Sundae Bowl at Dodger Stadium. That was an absolute delight. Let the hard churros take a little bath in some of the melted ice cream after. It was delicious. But I think I missed like an inning and a half watching it on TV, waiting in line for that, the rate that this game was going. And with how much time it takes to get out there, it is one of those things where I do wonder, depending on what areas you're in and what your commute to the game is, how fans have responded to all this, because I basically spent as much time going to and from in traffic as I did in Dodger Stadium for this game. Albeit it was enjoyable, it was nice out there. Would have liked to see Shohei crack a few dingers, but I think he had to lay low in honor of his former interpreter, who was finally getting the heat put down on him yesterday a little bit and starting to face the potential consequences of his actions, quote unquote. But yeah, other than that, fantastic experience. I didn't get to try nearly as much food as I wanted to, but that just means a return trip is in order here. So, Claudia, you go to a lot more games than the rest of us. I'm assuming this is, I think, the first in-person game I've been to since last year, so I hadn't been to a new pitch clock game yet. And it really has upped the pace in a way that is jarring.
I feel the same way. That's why if you go to get drinks, even though you look a little crazy because you get the tall boys at Fenway especially, you have to double up because I refuse to leave the game because you do miss the majority of it. Especially at Fenway, it's brutal. So yeah, welcome to the new age, GoJo. You got to just stock up. Next time, just bring a bag and then you can get all the food. And then you sit there and eat it. It might get cold or warm, but, you know.
Mike, we kind of got used to that with the Yard Goats in Connecticut, right? I mean, they had the pitch clock, and we'd go to those games, and we had a ball. Now, again, we were degenerates. Like in between innings, they had kids running the bases and races, and we were actually slapping money down on which 4-year-old was going to win. That's kind of how we rolled. But those games move along pretty quick with that pitch clock, because I have not been to a Major League Baseball game with the pitch clock. But, I mean, this is exactly what Major League Baseball was looking for. But we'll see, because the union and especially the pitchers are complaining that the pitch clock is one of the reasons for the elbow injuries. So, but let me tell you, baseball is going to take this, man. You get games in 2 hours, because I know they were a little over 3 hours average. And then last year they dropped to, I think, over 15 minutes. So it had really worked with the pitch clock. So, that I don't believe that's going anywhere. And they even upped it a little more with a man on base now to speed it up even more.
Yeah, no, it was overall, though, really enjoyable day. I mean, Dodger Stadium in the middle of the day is no one safe from sun, so I got to work on my tan a little bit, got to watch Gavin Stone get the win, the Dodgers win 3-1, and was on my merry way and got home enough in time, shout out to a good day game, to get a nap in before we had the nightcap of a little NBA action and some NHL, which, like you said, we'll get to talk about. Forget the battle on the ice. I want to talk about the battle that we got between Pasta and Kachuk at the end of that game, where everyone came to blows with Sara Civian later on. But before that, in MSG, Claudia, it got real interesting last night for a game that we had hyped up with Reggie Miller and the Boogeyman coming back into town, and this New York Knicks team continues to find a freaking way. Yeah.
F-bombs were thrown at Reggie Miller. Josh Hart let Reggie Miller know that F-bombs were being thrown at Reggie Miller, although I think he knew. OG Anunoby and Brunson both left game with injury. As we know, Brunson came back with that foot. They ended up winning to bring the series to a 2-0 lead. But, of course, the big question was, Brunson, how are you getting this done? And especially, how are you feeling?
We're just sticking together no matter what the situation is, no matter what's thrown at us, no matter what's a disadvantage for us. We're going to stick together, and that's just the thing that we always harp on for each other.
Well, a lot's being thrown at them. Injuries being one, and then not going to your bench is the second, and they're sort of tied together, which leads to a major issue when you're in a 7-game series, GoJo.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you've already had to see in this postseason run because of the injuries to the likes of Mitchell Robinson, who's now out 6 to 8 weeks, that Precious Achiuwa, who wasn't getting real minutes for Tibbs towards the end of the season, has now had to play. Alec Burks sighting last night in the game for all of, I think a minute of game time.
Yeah, I got a minute. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I watched that game, and we had been in awe of what Jalen Brunson had been doing. But last night in particular, watching him leave, and I get it, it's not like they had to amputate his foot. We don't know the full extent of what actually happened to it. But, Dad, given the nature of his game, where Jalen Brunson essentially operates as a human bumper car, going in, bouncing off guys in the lane, the stop-start, all these things that are predicated on your foot, and clearly looked uncomfortable when he came back, jumped out in, I think, the middle of the first quarter, didn't come back until the second half of that game. But immediately on coming back, resumed normal duties. And as he saw OG Anunoby, who had been incredible in the first half, over 20 points in the first half of this game to really carry the Knicks offensively, the guy just put the Superman cape back on, and they kept it business as usual. The conditioning level of this team and the toughness displayed by Jalen Brunson, who seems like peak New York athlete, was otherworldly last night. And I don't know what other takeaway there is, because he just continues to be that awe-inspiring.
You mentioned Anunoby with 28, even Chenzo with 28 as well. So you had others that could step up. But after however far they go, and if they are to get through this, which up 2-0 looks pretty good, and get through the Celtics, which are going to get through Cleveland to the final, whenever their season ends, the vacation that some of those guys are going to take where they need to do nothing, because they are going to be spent, and we keep wondering, is that going to catch up? The bench was 46-12 again in favor of the Pacers, but the Pacers, again, were the tops in the league in bench scoring, so that's not a shock, but such a disparity of the more people that the Pacers have to score in this, and how much you need Brunson. Even though we talked about the other players and what they did, when Brunson was out, what was it, a 10-point lead at halftime? They went to a double-digit lead for the Pacers. They were making hay while Brunson was out. Brunson comes back, scored, 25 of his 29 in the second half? I mean, dude is just a miracle worker right now. What he and Anthony Edwards have been doing to carry their teams has been nothing short of incredible. And to Brunson's credit, what he said is, hey, we spread it around, other people have to pick it up. Now, it's like spreading, frozen butter on a piece of toast. It doesn't spread much, because they don't have it. That doesn't spread to a lot of players because they ain't got a lot of players they're giving time to. So you're right, Mike, the conditioning. But then again, you're playing for Thibodeau. And if you're playing for him, you've already worked your ass off before the season and know exactly what to expect from him and what you have to do. But to do it night in and night out the way he has been doing it, and really this team, you got to give it to the whole team, but him, especially when it's on the anniversary of Willis Reed, right? In 1970 in the finals when he broke the broken leg coming back out when his teammates back then didn't know that he was going to come back out onto the court, and he did. And the whole Willis Reed spectacle that we that was incredible, obviously so many years ago. I'm sure there was a lot of wondering, was Brunson going to come out in the second half? What was he going to be able to do? Because we've talked about this has been a big part of the postseason with top teams is injuries, is how it's going to affect. Can you come back on the court but still affecting play like Murray, even though it's the defense that's affecting him as well? I'm just talking about injury. And Luka dealing with injury, and Embiid and how the 76ers dealt with injury. But that's, again, you're at the point of the season where nobody is 100%. And it's just a matter of how much duct tape and chicken wire you can get away with using and still get on the court.
Well, no one's 100%, but very few people, and then really, if any, are logging the kind of miles or have that the Knicks have. And so you look at a lot of these and say, hey, is this the result of the fact that you've been pounding for this long, where it didn't look like anything severe when Jalen Brunson left the game. We kind of saw the collision that appeared to be at the heart of it, and it didn't look like anything otherworldly. And you wonder between OG's hamstring going out the way it used to, and now what that presents going forward as a soft tissue injury is different. But the Knicks, you have to give them credit for the resiliency this team displays. Tom Haberstroh, our buddy, put this out last night after the game. The Knicks game in a nutshell and the way they were able to find a way. Their team assist leader was Isaiah Hartenstein, their center. Their team's rebound leader was Josh Hart, listed as a shooting guard. And their all-defense guy had 28 points in this game, and OG Anunoby. Like Jalen Brunson said, one guy goes out and they keep it moving. Yes, listen, Indiana was able to make a run when Jalen Brunson's out. There's no doubt. That's when they took the lead in the game. It got up to double digits. But you saw Dante DiVincenzo, Obi, the rest of those guys kind of adjust when he went out there. And then Dad on the other side, I mean, listen, when you talk about this from the Pacers' perspective, you had this one in the bag, and then you had their superstar limping back into the game, and a complete disappearing act from Tyrese Halliburton in the third quarter of this game. Like, I think that's got to be the other side of this. Is Tyrese Halliburton had 6 points in the first game, came out firing in the second game, but then when things got hairy down the stretch, disappeared in the third quarter, had a decent fourth quarter, but still wasn't looking to take over. And we've talked about this some with the Celtics, but I think you run into the same problem at times if you're not exactly set in your hierarchy with teams predicated on depth when you get to those late game moments. Certainly not a problem for a team like the Timberwolves, who's got Anthony Edwards, not a problem for the Oklahoma City Thunder with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but with this Pacers team, all of a sudden in those pivotal moments, it felt like it was still a little bit of team ball when you probably needed someone to come in and settle things down.
Yeah, I mean, we talk so much about Halliburton and what he's meant to that team. And 34, he rebounded from a poor game one, scored better in this one, but not when they needed it most. And when Brunson came back, what he did. I'll be interested to see Rick Carlisle, who got teed up twice in this game and got tossed. I can't wait to see the tape he's going to send to the NBA, because he had said there were what was it in the first game? How many plays that he wanted to send to the NBA and he didn't, and now he's probably going to be sending a whole reel to the NBA, to the officials.
Yeah, this Rick Carlisle after the game was very point blank about how he felt in the officiating in these first two games of the series. Listen to this.
One guy just said he didn't double dribble. But it looked to me like, Tibbs went out there and argued it, and they changed it. That's what it looked like, So I can only go by what I see, what I saw, and that's small beans compared to everything else, But small market teams deserve an equal shot. They deserve a fair shot, no matter where they're playing.
So in the first two games, Rick Carlisle sent 78 plays from those two games to the league to be reviewed. And Dad, while there has always been somewhat of a divide, it's felt like, between the big and small market teams, this does not feel like the postseason where you can bring that up credibly. And certainly this series where the opposing team had like 6.5 available dudes they were comfortable playing in a game where their star player went out for a quarter and a half, probably not the spot to try and bust this excuse out.
Yeah, I don't buy the small market thing here. Listening to Kenny Smith and Shaq and Charles talk about this, what was interesting, because I kind of agreed with Shaq on this and they were kind of, I think Shaq was kind of telling Carlisle, hey, basically knock it off if he wasn't. I'm kind of paraphrasing, to which I would disagree with that, because that's the coach's job. The coach's job is to make the waves. Say I wasn't going to send in the tape. Now I am, 78 plays, and talk about the officiating. And Shaq said from the player side, because we know Shaq was fouled about as much as anybody ever was fouled in the NBA. Because he was so big, and B, when they hack a Shaq because he was so bad at free throws. And he basically said, listen, if you're not getting the calls on the court as a player, and if it's not happening, don't moan about it. You got to, that's just the way it is. You got to accept it and play. Let your coach deal with it. But anything else from a player's standpoint, you can't let it affect your play. You can't let it get in your head. You just got to play through it. Again, easier said than done to do that from the player's standpoint, Claudia. But from the coach's standpoint, he is the one that needs to sit there at the podium and bring up all that stuff and say we're going to send it to the league, and not thinking that it's being fairly called.
I was just going to say, I agree with you guys in that it's not fair to do the small market comparison in a situation like this. I think it's almost like child psychology. He's just saying it because he wants the refs to have it in mind, to where they're like, okay, that's what everybody's going to say if we don't. And if we're going to review this, but we didn't review that. And that's the situation here, right? They called the double dribble, then they got together and said it didn't happen. So that was basically reviewing when they said they couldn't review the kickball, but they were both unreviewable situations. So I agree. I wouldn't even blame the players for being angry about that, but I think that's probably why Carlisle brought that to the table.
Yeah, at some point, like Shaq said, the players do have to put it away, and they have to play. And Carlisle, and you could be right, Claudia, that he didn't think at all about the small market, but it's just getting into the head of the league, getting into the head of the officials, that this is not being called fair. Who knows if it works? I have no idea, but that's the coach's job, and then the player's job is to play through it as best you can.
I get it, but it just still sounds hilarious given the fact that we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder as the 1 seed in the Western Conference this year, and all the other teams that we've seen pop up. It does underscore it has not been a banner crunch time performance from NBA officials through a lot of this postseason. We have spent way too much time talking about 2-minute reports and what's going on at the end of the game and phantom calls and all of these things. There have been a lot of players that have stepped up and been ready for the moment, and there have been a lot of officials that have peed down their legs in pivotal moments of these games. So, fellas, Zebras, let's get it together for the next home stretch of the NBA postseason here. Coming up next, though, someone who did stand tall, the 2024 MVP, Nikola Jokic. Deserving? Not? We'll get Shaq's thoughts on this next here on GoJo and Golic.
Back to GoJo and Golic. The Nuggets look to come back from an 0-2 deficit on the road tomorrow, and they'll be doing so with the league's MVP for the third time in 4 seasons. Yes, it is Nikola Jokic, and whether you agree or not, that is what it is, Senior. Do you agree?
You know, this is one of those things where what's everybody's definition of an MVP, right? And one of the ones I hear all the time is, well, if you take them off the team, okay, take Luka off Denver. They don't have a shot to win the title. Take SGA off Oklahoma City. There's no chance they're a number 1 seed. And take Luka off Dallas. And who knows where the hell, where do they end up, in the middle of the pack, 4 or 5 in that they're going to be lower than that. So all the teams taking your star off it are going to be worse. So I'm not sure that's the way to go about it. And then is it best player on best team? SGA, because Oklahoma City was the number 1 seed. Well, then, why vote? Just whatever the best team is with the best record, just pick the best player on that team, make them the MVP. So, there are so many different variations of what you think or who you think and how you think the MVP should go that this is one of those kind of like when baseball had to have an all-star representative from every team. And for years when I was at ESPN, I yelled and screamed, this is dumb. You got guys that don't deserve to be there. Give it to other players. And then finally I threw my hands up and I said, what the hell? If you're going to do it, do it. Who cares? I'm kind of that way here with, okay, how many voters vote for this and what is their criteria? Just like the 13-person panel doing college football playoffs, you don't know how they are all thinking. They all think differently. So I'm fine with Jokic winning the MVP.
There we go.
Who's going to argue that he wouldn't be the best player in the league? Now, I'll say this. If SGA has another year next year, like this year, and they're up at the top or they're at the top, I think he probably has a good chance to win it, depending on what the Joker does. But I have no problem with this. I'm fine with Jokic winning the MVP.
GoJo, I want to hear your take. So just so everyone knows, 79 first-place votes for the Joker. SGA got 15. Doncic just got 4. Do you agree with that, or should there have been maybe all Jokic votes? Should SGA or Doncic should have got more? What do you think, GoJo?
So I'm more surprised that Doncic didn't get more. I actually think that SGA is a very deserving candidate for second on this one. And Luka's late season surge, absolutely, I thought would have made that a lot closer than it was, based on the way people were talking about it, based on the public perception of that award, which I get isn't the voters' criteria. But Luka was on an unholy tear. I know Shaq talked about wanting stat stuffers. Nobody stuffed the stat sheet more than Luka did over the course of this season. Now, for Jokic, he was just the second player to ever record 2,000 points, 900 rebounds, and 600 assists in a season. It's him and Oscar Robertson, so pretty good company there.
Yeah.
You look at some of the advanced stuff. I know Bomani Jones always talks about win shares per 48, and Nikola Jokic was at the top of that above SGA. So I think what Dad hinted on, though, is the biggest thing is for a guy like SGA, it's more about, I think MVP inertia is a real thing where you've got to have a few seasons of being in everyone's consciousness and being thought of in that way in order to actually crack through meaningfully in the voting. There was a while where we were coronating Denver as the likely back-to-back champion potential, steamrolling through this. And when Jokic is the best player on the even though Oklahoma City ended up being the 1 seed, most of public perception was that the Denver Nuggets were the best team in the NBA, and this award tends to default to best player on best team. So, Dad, I wasn't surprised by that.
Yeah, and also people are going to look at what's going on now with Denver and see they're down 0-2 and say, oh, this was wrong. Remember, it's a regular season award. People are going to look at the postseason and make some opinions based off the postseason. But to your point, and I agree, Mike, and this is really true in every sport, of a young player having a great year, a good year, a great year, and then where do they ascend to? Because next year, you know, 2 guys who have just absolutely, trampolined into this conversation next year, if they're to continue on, is going to be Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brunson, right? Those two, what Anthony Edwards, what he did when Karl Anthony Towns went down has been incredible, and since Cat's been back. And Brunson, we keep talking about him time after time. So there are more players along with SGA and Joker and Luka that are jumping in. It's good. I know when fourth was Giannis, Jalen Brunson was fifth, and Tatum was sixth. Anthony Edwards was seventh in this one. So like I said, Brunson and Edwards are going to be jumping into this. It'll be interesting next year, but I have zero problem with it this year, Claudia. It sounds like you do.
Well, my question is, what else does Luka have to do? And I get that if you pluck him off the team, it's the same scenario for all those guys you just mentioned, but you gave him Kyrie, and that's not really making the difference. I don't think they're going to win anything. What is he supposed to do? He led the league with 34 points, 9.2 rebounds, almost 10 assists, and the defense got better, 1.5 steals. That is my question. If it's not this year, when is he going to win this? When you have guys like Anthony Edwards and all these youngins.
That's the thing, though, is I don't think any of this exists in a vacuum, right? There are it was absolutely an MVP caliber season. He just happens to be running into the Jokic run the same way you could have asked this question for any number of teams in the Eastern Conference when LeBron James's Cavaliers or Miami Heat were sitting as a lid on it for all of them. Is sometimes you just run into forces that are bigger than you. It doesn't make you a lesser player. It just means that when it comes to some of these awards where we can only give out one, eventually a bunch of deserving people are going to have careers left by the wayside that would have been different or would have looked different on paper, Dad, were it not for the existence of someone in this case like a Nikola Jokic, who's just in the run of being the best player in the league right now.
And what goes into that as well, the team around you, right? If Dallas finished ahead, like Oklahoma City finished ahead of Denver, but I mean, barely, right? I mean, it was the last game of the season that was decided, and we still all thought Denver was the best team and Joker was the best player on that team, so hence gets that award. If Dallas was fighting for the number one seed, maybe that's going to have to be it. But then you get into who's playing around you. You can only do so much. You have to have the help around you. Now, Kyrie has been certainly in the playoffs for Luka, but that adds into it as well on what kind of help, because that's where you look. You'll say, well, he had all those great stats that Luka did, but he only got his team to the 5th seed. So how good could it be? I mean, I'm just saying that's the mentality of some of the voters. Some of the voters would think differently, but you just
well,
don't
that's why
know.
I'm saying, though, that's why I'm saying this doesn't exist in a vacuum, because Nikola Jokic has won the MVP as a 6th seed before in a season where he was just so statistically dominant that you couldn't help but do it. But also when you looked around, you couldn't see another. But that's what I'm saying, Claudia, is that year you didn't have someone you could put up and say, hey, they're so much better, we can ignore this. Whereas, Luka's got an insane stat stuffing season. They are a little bit lower seed, which I don't think should be prohibitive. But then you combine that with the fact that we've already conditioned ourselves coming off that title to say, hey, Jokic's the best player in the world right now, and the standard didn't slip this year. And if he's doing all that and the team is still producing in that same way, it's hard for me to argue too hard against him winning the MVP, because when I watched that guy time in and time out this year, that looked like the best player in basketball. Now, we can ask questions about why that's waning right now and why we have continued to run into this problem in the NBA where, hey, you get to the postseason and you've had some former MVPs have a pretty bad time and now their team's on the cusp of getting swept. That doesn't feel sweet, but I do think it's just different because, again, none of this is static.
I get it. It's a time thing. I'm just saying, when else is he going to do 34, 9, and 10? So for him, I understand it's not his fault, but I just can't see the voters looking at this year compared to the ones coming next and say, oh, well, this is the year he should get it just because nobody else deserves it. So it just sucks. I mean, that's all.
The unfortunate thing about that, Claudia, to your point and to what Mike said, is Jokic set that standard. So if Jokic is up to that standard or by it every year, people are going to say, well, he's doing it again. So you would have to be so far above him or just have and Luka did have a great year, but your stats would have to be out of this world to say, okay, we're going to knock off the guy who keeps putting up stats that we then keep rewarding him by giving him the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to that point, coming up next year, let's talk about the ripple effect that could happen then, both with the perception of the award like the MVP and future NBA champions if we play out what looks like is happening right now in that Denver Nuggets series, and the defending champions with the 3 of the last 4-year MVP all of a sudden find themselves knocked off in the second round, and what that means for everybody else. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I saw an interesting note from our buddy Charlie over at the Dominique Foxworth show that if the Nuggets were to actually lose in this round, the Wolves would likely become the title favorites here. But regardless, there could be a sixth new NBA champion in the last 6 years in the NBA. And as we've looked around this round, and we've seen, even though Rick Carlisle protested they were being treated differently because of it, a bunch of small market teams making their way into this level of the postseason, and the discourse hasn't immediately defaulted to, well, the league office is going to be bummed about this, or the league really wants the New York Knicks in the postseason for ratings XYZ. Dad, it feels like the league's in a really healthy place right now overall. I don't know what your perception about this has been, but as I sit here right now, this feels really good. And for the NBA, that's kind of making the same transition the NFL did years ago when it lost a bunch of the old guard quarterbacks like Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and all these guys and replaced them with this new younger group. It feels like the NBA is restocking the cupboards in a big way this postseason.
They should not feel good. They should feel great for what's going on, because we've talked about the guys that are coming to the end of their career, still worth talking about, but we know we're just hanging on, right, until they're gone. But I think the key is that the young, good players, they're all not Wemby situations where you're a great player on a bad team, so we only get the regular season to watch you, and then you go away and we go through a postseason. We have young, good players in the postseason leading their teams. You know, we keep mentioning them, right? SGA and Ant and Jalen Brunson and Halliburton and, you know, guys that are leading teams that we haven't seen at the top in a while, young players that aren't going anywhere, even throw in Orlando with the young team that they had, you know, and on the rise. So I think that's what's helping. And then, God forbid, if San Antonio starts building well around Victor, you know, and that team starts to make a rise, which they certainly have been known to do and has a few championships under their belt to show it. So I think that's the biggest difference, is the fact that the young, great players in the league now are on teams that are vying for championships. So it makes the transition a hell of a lot smoother.
Well, I think they're all extremely likable too, because parity is always a difficult concept for me, because we see it like if you look at, you know, men's college basketball and talk about parity, you don't know any of the stars on teams, so it doesn't really help you to have different teams cycling through and not to know who the big bad on the block is here. Versus right here and now, especially with what's going on with the Denver Nuggets, who finally got over the hump, had been the subject of a lot of vitriol because they hadn't cashed the championship and people thought Jokic was getting too much hardware for a guy that hadn't accomplished the thing that we only seem to care about in this league, which is winning championships. Now, as we get near the top on this, I'm going to be really interested to see how Denver responds to everything that's going on in this series, because we've got, you know, the stuff coming out from Gilbert Arenas about texts that he says he's getting from the bench there about how they're checked out. Pablo Torre finds out yesterday, does the podcast about Nikola Jokic's horse love and how this guy really seems to be more invested in that than any perception of how invested he is in basketball. And then you've got like Jamal Murray the other night after he throws the heating pack out in the core, doesn't get suspended, gets fined, and then basically dismisses it, saying, yeah, I'll take responsibility, but that was 2 days ago. We're on to the next one at this point. Like, it sounds like a team that Dad has been rattled by the moment in a way that surprises me a little bit, considering what they put in to get to this point and the core of this team's experience together.
So I wonder, have they, you know, this was a likable team. We all laughed about, oh, Joker can't wait to get back to his horses. You know, how much he just loves where basketball falls is lower on the list, you know, and Jamal Murray playing extremely well. Wow, look what they've done. Are they becoming unlikable now? You know, with the Jamal Murray comments and what he's done out of frustration and hearing that Joker just wants to get back to his horses, which a year ago we thought was, oh, how cool. Look at this. The best player in the NBA is more concerned about his horses. Now it kind of, is it going to get used against him to say, okay, where is the commitment level? Where is this? Now all of a sudden the supposedly best team in the NBA got smoked twice at home, and we got a guy who doesn't give a damn if he threw stuff out on the court and someone may got hurt, and we got another guy who's worried more about his horses. You wonder if that worm is turning there on those guys.
So I think for Jokic, the play hasn't dipped enough for me to look and say, like, oh, yeah, this guy's clearly mailing it in. It's a difficult matchup for him, and I think talking about how that affects the way people approach him going forward is interesting. But I'm not going to lie, it was like, and this is a small thing, and this is so sports talk hacky of me, but I felt the Stu Gotts in me rise up when I saw those Jamal Murray comments. I was like, all right, give me a break. Like, what are we doing here? Trying to act like this wasn't something that you should be apologizing for. Come out, own it, move on from it there, but to be that dismissing of it when now you've got options. It's one thing when last year they felt like this force and it was a little bit new, but now we talked about it. The rest of the buffet line is full. You might want one food item when you're hungry and get ready to go eat. You might say, hey, I really want pizza. Hell, I was at a buffet yesterday at Dodger Stadium. You might want pizza. And then all of a sudden you walk up to the buffet line and, oh man, chicken's looking good over there. Oh, they got sliders out here. Oh, there's a dessert tray. This is incredible. That's kind of what you've got now looking around at the rest of the NBA. Like, oh, you don't like the way this feels over here? Anthony Edwards is over here giving you all the right stuff every time he gets the opportunity. SGA and this Oklahoma City Thunder team look like they are having the most fun doing all of this together. Jalen Brunson has reached peak New York Knicks nirvana in this game, and those guys seem to have a clutch moment all through that roster every time you need it. Like, the minute you don't like something, if you're the casual fan, you can turn and say, all right, yeah, I'm kind of done with this and move on and go enjoy the rest of it. And that was kind of the vibe that I got coming off of that last game where you've got Mike Malone out there stomping on the court. And I get it's the coach's job. I get everyone might be playing the part that they're supposed to, but at some point it looks less like that and more like you've lost composure in the middle of a series the minute something got hard in a way it really hasn't over the last 2 years for them.
That's also a worry, too, when you don't show up like you're expected to in the postseason. And as you guys are talking about all of these young stars who show up, I took a look at the odds. I was curious to see what the preseason odds were compared to what they are now. If you look at the Pacers, for example, they had the second longest odds, 25,000. The Thunder were 10,000. I mean, all of these teams are at the top of the board now. The Timberwolves are at 3-1. I mean, they were 66-1 before the season started. So that parity, too, I think is exciting for the rest of the league. And to that, I ask you guys, at this point where the series are at, where do you see value on the board? The Celtics opened the favorites. They were tied with the Bucks at plus 450 to open the season. Now, though, they're minus 115. You have the Timberwolves at 3-1, Thunder at plus 650, and the Knicks at 11-1, which you could say if they get through Boston, they could certainly win it all. And now's the time to bet it, GoJo.
Yeah, I would say that I would probably stop it at OKC, though, just because, like, I think the Knicks can still win this series. Like, they clearly are just built of different stuff than most teams. I said they're like a movie basketball team. Like, there's no way they should be pulling this stuff off. But, Dad, now that you saw OG limping off with the hamstring there and knowing Jalen Brunson's now a bit compromised and going to have to battle more as this series shifts to the road, I worry about their ability to go up against a team like Boston after all of this, given what we've seen from the Celtics death machine so far. So I would probably say Oklahoma City, to me, is where I see the most value on that board. What about you?
I would agree, Claudia. I can't go with the Knicks just for what Mike said. You're just waiting. They just seem to be hanging by a thread. Also, already lost Mitchell Robinson. You know, he is done 6 to 8 weeks as part of that rotation. So you just, as it goes on, if you're a Knicks fan, you got to love what's happening, but you got to be holding your breath. Anytime you see one of your guys grab a body part or limp a little bit, you'll be like, oh, God, here we go again. So that would be a tough one for me to lay money on. I would agree. I think I would go with Oklahoma City.
It's like right now I'm running out of gas, and every morning, so a quick drive to work, I'm like, all right, I'll make it, but it's slowly running out. That's the Knicks right now. It's about to go empty.
Yeah, the Knicks are saying, I know my car. You don't have to tell me I'm running out of gas. I know what's going on here. And then all of a sudden you're going to see them needing the can on the side of the road here. Hopefully not, because this team has been a joy to watch, but it's just a different standard that we're looking down the road at least right now, with what the Boston Celtics have put on tape. Coming up next, I want to make my father miserable, talking about one of the things he hates most in this world, the NFL schedule release. Next.
Oh, God.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We will be getting the NFL schedule, just not yet. We were supposed to get it today, but they moved it to next Wednesday. Why? We don't know. They didn't tell us. But what they are telling us is basically the whole schedule, because Adam Schefter tweeted this out. The schedule features 9 playoff rematches, including all 4 divisional round games, both conference championships, as well as the Super Bowl. Why aren't they giving us the schedule, Senior? What's the holdup?
I hate this. All right. I've never liked this. I never cared. You all know basically half your schedule from your division. We already have out there the other games and the rematches. We just don't know when now. I mean, but this is yet another thing over the years. People love this stuff. Love it. And I have to act like I love it because I do the Sunday night games on Westwood One. I was supposed to do the show tonight, of the schedule release, and now it's pushed to next week. So I'm doing that show. I'm doing the schedule release show for Westwood One, and I will talk excitedly about it. But Mike, I'm not going to lie. I don't get it. I don't get why everybody goes nuts over, oh my God, they're playing this team here. They're playing that team there. So what? I just don't get it.
Well, I mean, you know why fans go nuts over it, because the schedule is out so they can actually figure out which games they're going to go to, which ones they can set up there. That's when they can start buying tickets. So commercially for them, that makes a ton of sense. And we've heard over the years, I mean, you know, this is a former player. The only thing players really care about is, are we playing on, if you're not one of the regular teams, Thanksgiving or Christmas? When are your short weeks where you're playing on Thursday night football? When are the buys tucked into here? So that's the stuff you care about as a player. The rest of it, I got asked this yesterday in terms of Dad actually prognosticating a season. Because to your point, we know who all the teams are playing right now. We have everyone's home and away teams that they've got on the schedule. We just don't know the order yet. And as you look at the season, Dad, when I try and prognosticate or think about who's going to have the best shot or who's got a schedule that's favorable, that matters a lot more to me. Who they have on the schedule and where they have them on the schedule, meaning home or away, a lot more than necessarily the order. Now, if you tell me, hey, you've got one team playing on a short week against a quality opponent, then I might start to look at that a certain way and factor it in. But outside of that, the who matters a lot more than the order to me in terms of trying to actually figure out who I think is going to be good over the course of a season.
Yeah, and the when I would look at as well. Am I going to a cold weather place? Am I early in the season? Am I going to a really hot weather place?
Sure.
So that's the stuff I do look at as well. Monday Night Football. Listen, the first couple of times I played on it, I loved it, and then I just thought it just messes up the schedule. So I liked Sunday 1:00 games very, very much. I only played on Thursdays. I played on a couple of Thanksgiving games. We got a Friday game last year. We're going to get it again. And now we're going to get a Wednesday game this year because the NFL said, you know what? We don't care that Christmas is on a Wednesday. We're going to play. So the only day of the week we're not going to have NFL is on a Tuesday. And I'd imagine at some point they'll figure out a way to have it on a Tuesday. Maybe we already have with a delay or something like that. We probably have, but not like built in the schedule. So that's a pretty wild thing to be playing on a Wednesday.
I'd take it, though. Wednesday football, I would certainly take that. And to answer both of your question, the people who are waiting for this release are sports bettors, because we have a DraftKings market where you can have win totals for every team. So we want to look at the entire schedule and break down every game and say whether it's going to go over or under. Like the Browns, for example, are expected to have the toughest schedule. They did tell us that. This is based off of opponent winning percentage. Their win total set at 8.5. It's juiced to the over, -130. They had 11 wins last year with 5 different quarterbacks. The hope is that they stick to 1 or maybe 2 this year. So with that, Senior, I ask you, they let us know a few things. So AFC North teams face the toughest schedule, NFC South easiest, Browns toughest of all teams. So if we were looking just at this Browns squad, 8.5 wins. Do you agree with the market here? Do they get 9?
Oh, I think they get 9. And also on the strength of schedule, that's going on last year's records, right? I mean, teams are different every single year. That's the other thing. I mean, you could say you're going to have the toughest schedule, and then you end up with 2 games where you're playing against rookie quarterbacks. But because last year they had now if they have rookie quarterbacks, they probably weren't very good. But there's so much that goes into that on, okay, it's a tough schedule based on last year, but their team may not be as good this year. So I don't know. Again, I'm not into the betting as much as you are, like you are on what you're looking for. But I would go over on that number, yes, because I have a feeling they're not going to have almost, one hand full of quarterbacks playing this year.
I do think, though, it is interesting. To Claudia's point, yeah, it's based off last year's win percentage, which is a flawed way to do strength of schedule. We understand that, but it's based on the information that we have right now. And usually our buddy Aaron Schatz, who's the inventor of DVOA, that metric, who's over at FTN, usually as the season gets closer and the offseason settles, they'll do a much more predictive, or at least the closest you can get to, factoring in roster moves, factoring in players that people brought into the draft. But still, as a baseline looking at it, Dad, I do think it's interesting to see at least kind of a rough area where some teams ended up, especially ones that, let's say, surprised last year, like the Houston Texans that were the darling from last season, where everything together sit in this metric tied for 4th with the toughest strength of schedule going into this season. That's a team that made some moves this offseason, as certain guys walked, but generally has their young core together and now is going to get tested a little more. I think looking at their schedule, they cross over with the NFC North. So they're going to be on the road at Lambeau, on the road against a Vikings team who could be breaking in a new quarterback. They're on the road at Arrowhead, on the road in Dallas at Jerry World. So there's some tough games on that schedule that you can start to factor in when you look at teams like them, teams like the Las Vegas Raiders that last year made that run once Antonio Pierce took over, tied for the 8th toughest schedule, whereas the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who won the South last year, tied for 27th in terms of strength of schedule, at least how this sits. And so it's not a perfect metric, but it kind of gives you an idea of, all right, as we're sitting over here wondering about a team like the darling Atlanta Falcons after their offseason, Tampa Bay, who sits there running it back with the core that won the NFC South last year, might have a schedule that lines up to keep them competitive again, and those little tidbits can be helpful.
Yeah, they can, but I think one thing you mentioned right there, with Houston playing Minnesota, they're going to have a rookie quarterback. Playing Dallas based off Dallas's record last year at 12-5. Do we think Dallas is winning 12 games again? I don't. So that's based off Dallas's record last year. I don't think Dallas is going to be as good this year. So I do think that part of it is flawed to say, oh my God, it's the whatever toughest schedule. When now some of those teams to the other side of it may be better. Right? Because teams last year that got Houston, I'm sure were thinking that was supposed to be part of their easier schedule, and Houston, smacked more than a few people around.
Well, I mean, you look at that in terms of, you're right, certain teams with different quarterbacks, injury, like that's why I'm going to be fascinated. I will, to see how the Bengals schedule shakes out, because based on their record from last year, obviously it's going to slot them in one place, but Joe Burrow coming back puts them in a completely different stratosphere. Right. They play in the toughest division in football, though I think we could have that argument, based on that, the AFC East versus the AFC North in terms of which of those is going to be the bigger juggernaut, the NFC West versus maybe the NFC North as well, given the way that a team like Green Bay came on after last year. So you could start to look at some of that, but I do think the Bengals are really interesting for that reason, because now you've got Joe Burrow back throwing at practice. Their roster looks a little bit different, but it seems like they're going to keep T. Higgins now. So a lot of that taking shape in a way that makes them a really, really froggy pick here.
While I'm saying this, Claudia, can you look up what the over-under is for the Jets? Because they're another team, right? They go 7-10 last year. So they're looked at as easier part of the schedule, but if Aaron Rodgers, for whatever reason, is healthy this year, that's a better than 7-10 team. But you're not getting that based on what the strength of schedule says from last year. What are they, Claudia?
9.5, senior.
Yeah.
115 to the over, so around even. What do you think?
And they've got weapons there. The defense is playing well. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, why would we think that wouldn't happen? I mean, I think it's a three teams there, Buffalo, Miami, and if he stays healthy, it's going to be the Jets as well. So, yeah, I think that adds to it. I do think they can get there.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you successfully trick my dad into talking about the NFL schedule release. Coming up next, Jason Fitz, does he have a rebuttal for the kiss track heard around the world yesterday?
and Golic. The Greenlight Pod crew may have started something. I thought it would be bad at first, but it's actually turning out to be really good. It inspired GoJo after he was mentioned in this Kiss track to create some of his own.
The fitsy bitsy spider that went to Juilliard, rosined up his bow and played that fiddle hard, parried like fencers with the band on the road, played When I Die Young to sold out shows. College football Mondays where he and I met, watched him drink 2 monsters in 5 hours on set. I looked at this Muppet like, is this a joke? Stared him right in his face and said, save time and do coke. Hair spiked like punched, hats all tell a story. Of Vegas to Nashville to Bristol for glory. Funko Pop stacked like Steven Jackson. All the smoke in his basement, high passion. Now adding up splat points because he's about that action. And today he's yelling Yahoo to all of his haters, hoping this will be the year for his beloved Raiders.
So diss tracks, a thing of the past. Now it's kiss tracks, just showing love for people in your life, which we now have the fitsy bitsy spider here to give us his feedback on the kiss track and hopefully a rebuttal here.
Look, this was brilliant, Mike. By the way, great work by you. And I'll be honest, when I first saw it come up, I thought it was going to say diss track. Right? Like I just thought I thought you were going to slam me. So I was ready. I was ready for all sorts of comments about Thick. I had a little notepad. I was like, okay. Then I watched it and I was like, wait, wow, this was nice. Like nice. I gotta rework the whole thing. And then I got to thinking about it and I'm like, man, there's a lot of pressure on that. There will be a rebuttal track, but it's not ready yet. It takes a little minute here. Like there's a different level of expectation. Mike does anything in music is like partially well. Like Mike could stand up at a I've seen this before, stand up at a karaoke bar and do a moderate performance and everybody says, oh, I can't believe it. Like there's a different level of expectation when you stand up at the karaoke bar and people know you got Grammys. Like I'm just saying, I got to be careful here on how this kiss track rebuttal happens.
So this is interesting because I encountered this phenomenon before. This is the big white guy on the dance floor phenomenon, which was a 300-pounder in college who had some modicum of rhythm. When I would go out on the dance floor, all of my teammates would be like, oh man, wow, Golic can really move. I didn't have to do a lot to cross that threshold because, again, no one expects a lot from the big fat white guy on the dance floor. You're right, Fitz. In this case, I have come out here into your dojo and immediately shown myself to be more competent than people would expect. So you're right. There is a lot of pressure on you right now, and you have to be nice, which I don't think people understand. The major tenet of me and Jason's relationship is ripping on each other. We're friends. That's how it goes. And so the fact that he has to do this, be good at it, and be nice to me has really put the clamps on him.
But it does. I have a question, though. See, because you paid it forward, right? You sent the kiss track to me. And so I spent a good portion of the first part of it, which shows you that I have too much time on my hands. I spent a good portion yesterday at first trying to figure out, do I rebuttal you? Because I think that's what, America wants. Or do I turn around and spread the love to a kiss track to somebody else? And is it like one of those pay it forward things? Like, am I supposed to pick some random friend and just kiss track them so that it continues? Or do I come right back at you and we have the kiss track battle that everybody wants?
No, we don't care about other shows. We care about this show. So do it for Mike. And
I would also say, Jason, I did multiple. Like I did one for Macon from the Greenlight Pod, who did one for me. I did one for you. I did one for Mina Kimes. So you got to get to work in the lab right now, man.
I'm working on a track. Let's just say that I'm working on a track. Full track.
So just for, we've talked about obviously Juilliard, the band Perry, of which you played the fiddle, but you were also the band leader for them as well. And me and Mike and you have had great conversations about music and writing music. How many songs, I'm not saying how many ended up being out there, how many songs have you written in your career?
Hundreds and hundreds. I'm actually, I've spent a lot of time recently in Nashville working with some buddies because I'm going to start putting some music out just because I want to, and so it's funny because that part of it, like people ask if I still play, the answer to that is always yes. Like I'm never going to stop playing the fiddle. I'm never going to stop playing the piano. I'm never going to stop writing songs only I care about, right? I don't miss being in the music business, but I'll always make music. So yeah, like that never stops for me. That's something that I think even now, lucky for me, post ESPN in my life, where I actually have time to breathe and look around. I've spent far more time in the last 6 months being creative than I had in the last 6 years because I just didn't have time. So I think it's like anything else, you sort of have to shut some of the noise off to be able to focus on that. So yeah, like this actually, and Mike and I have done some fun things for Cheese It together. But even that, like Mike came over to this like fun story. I don't think anybody knows. Mike came over to the house and the track was ready. Everything was good. And Mike sat there and did his rap portion on it. And I was like, holy cow. I actually looked at him in my living room. I'm like, Mike, that was really good. And he hadn't done that before, like in front of a microphone. It was really good. And then he sat on the couch while I squealed out really high notes and looked at me like I was an idiot. That's the joy of what this whole process is.
It was amazing. We did a music video for a Cheez-It ad when we were at ESPN that Jason wrote the lyrics to and then helped us record at his house there. So with that musical experience in mind, Jason, I did want to ask you, because the whole Diss Kiss track source was this Drake beef with Kendrick Lamar that everyone was digesting over the last couple days. And I know country music, it's a totally different landscape, but in general, as someone way more familiar with the music industry than us, is conflict good for music creation the same way it is in like sports, where we love when our teams actually have animosity? We love what that brings out of teams. Is animosity and conflict actually something that helps music at all?
Yes, I think it pushes everybody. Realistically, even if you go, I was listening to an interview with Def Leppard, of all things, from the 80s, and they were talking about when they went in to do the record that had Love Bites on it, and they were talking about the fact that they were ready to make another just standard Def Leppard record, and Mutt Lange, who produced that, a very famous producer, also did like Back in Black for AC/DC, did Shania Twain, like he's done everything. Look up Mutt Lange's album work, and it's incredible. But the guys were talking about how Mutt Lange came to him and said, man, if you just do another record, you're going to be like everybody else. Listen to who's out there doing music better than you right now and take some of those influences. So they did. They listened to, they said, a bunch of the Police and a bunch of Prince. And they use that as inspiration. Like, I think there is some competitive nature to when you hear somebody else put music out that you haven't thought of, you do step back and you're like, holy blank, if they're doing that, what can we do? And that's become a real thing. I think there's a better brother and sisterhood in most of country music than there is in hip hop, for sure. There's more support, but there is certainly side eye of like, man, if he's doing that, maybe I should try this. And that's the sort of stuff that keeps you out of your comfort zone.
Man, Def Leppard. 1976 they came together, and they're still touring. They are still. I love the bands from when I grew up that are back out touring again, and what they must feel that it's like to actually do it sober this time around. But absolutely amazing. So that's the rap we're talking about with Kendrick and Drake. In country, have there been, do you know of, songs that were actually done against one another? I mean, do we have any of those?
There hasn't, that I can think of. I'm sure somebody's going to hit me with something and say I'm an idiot for not thinking of it. Off the top of my head, no. But I've been in studio sessions where in the middle of like working on a project, somebody comes in and they just hand over, hey, this is what so-and-so just did. Why aren't we doing stuff like that? So I think it's less about like I'm going to trash artist A and more about like, hey, artist A is kicking my butt right now musically, so I'm going to try and get to their level. There is heat. I mean, I won't say heated, but I will say there is definitely rivalry when it comes to like who's winning the CMAs and who's winning the ACMs and who's getting credit for Entertainer of the Year, things like that. Like, people get really fired up about that, but they rarely write a track about it. Maybe that's what we need to do next. Like, we could get rich writing diss tracks right now between, like, we just got to figure out where the right rivalry is. The problem is, if you look at it, like, look at what's happening right now with Post Malone and with Beyonce and artists that are coming into country. Part of the reason they love doing this stuff is because, frankly, there's this real sense of camaraderie. Like, in country, I remember Jordan Davis told me the story when he put out the song Buy Dirt with Luke Bryan. He'd written it and thought it was good. So he just texted to Luke. It was like, man, I'd be really honored if you'd be on this. Didn't even really know him. And Luke's like, yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it's that simple in the country music community more often than not.
Fascinating look behind the curtain, as always, from, again, Grammy winner, Juilliard trained, the band Perry's very own Jason Fitz, kind enough to join us now. You guys have known him over at Yahoo Sports, doing a great job there. And do want to talk some of that with you, Jason, because you had a very animated response. You were sitting here at the tail end of our last segment when we were talking about the NFL schedule release, which I'd have to imagine for you is a little bit more important. As a diehard Raiders fan, you probably live and breathe that stuff, right? The schedule release is like drugs for you.
No, it's the stupidest thing in the sports calendar. Like, look, you can Google right now. You can literally just Google who do the Raiders play in 2027, and 14 of the games are already determined. Like, what do we? Oh my God, they got to play the Chiefs in December instead. Like, who cares? And Senior was, by the way, brilliant in his point that the Cowboys. What are they going to be? Right. So what are we saying today? We're going to spend next Wednesday, and I'm going to do this for Yahoo. I'm going to do a bunch of video content. We're going to pick the best games of the year. All these things. Who the hell knows? Like, nobody knows. Like right now, we're saying it's going to be good. But I will say this: Senior's getting soft on you, Mike, because he let you get away with saying the AFC East is one of the best divisions in football. It is not. All right, it is not. The Patriots are an abject disaster. They're going to have to figure out their quarterback. The Dolphins are a house of cards that only beat teams that sucked last year. We spent all year talking about it. The Bills have taken a step back, at least in theory, in the eyes of most, with their wide receiver room. And you're going to just presume that 473-year-old Aaron Rodgers comes back from the Achilles injury and is playing like Aaron at his prime? No, I'm out. The AFC East is trash.
So who's the best division in football then, Jason?
The best division, I haven't really thought this through off the top of my head, but it's not to go through them. The AFC East is bad. The AFC South is bad. The AFC West is mid at best, and that's only because the Chiefs are there. AFC North is the best division in the AFC. And right now, I'd say definitively the NFC North is a better division than the AFC East. I mean, whatever's going to happen with Minnesota aside, Chicago is much improved. Detroit is obviously where they are right now in a very good way. Like, we all think Detroit's going to be good moving forward, right? Like, so Green Bay's got their quarterback. If Jordan Love continues to play the way he did at the end of last year, NFC North's a better division than the AFC East.
I think the AFC North is the best division in football. If you can get one or two quarterbacks for Cleveland, Joe Burrow coming back, I think top to bottom, it's right there as the best division. Let's talk about your division and your team. Obviously, the surprise of the first round was Michael Penix Jr. going number 8 to Atlanta. But then your Raiders taking Brock Bowers after last year in the second round, taking Michael Mayer, who should have won the why am I blanking on the Mackey Award a couple of years ago, and started coming on toward the latter part of the season when they actually started throwing him the ball. They take Brock Bowers, who I love, by the way. Did you like this pick? And how well do you see these two working together?
Look, I thought it was a home run pick because it's the first time in all the years I've covered the draft. We did a live stream for Yahoo where I haven't had to justify the pick, right? Like, usually it's, why would you take that guy? And to me, when you are constantly, at best, a mediocre football team, at some point you are going to have to rip it all apart, and you're going to have to do things the right way. And the right way means building not just for next year and putting Band-Aids on things, but building for 3 to 5 years. Like, look, the Raiders were not going to be Super Bowl contenders this year. If everything breaks right, glory be to God. They just pray to get into the playoffs every year. I go through this every year as a fan, right? So to me, what you did here is you looked at it and said, QB not on the board. Brock Bowers, clearly best player available on the board at that point for them, clearly, right? So you can't always sit here and say, I'm going to address needs in the draft. I know everyone wanted them to take an offensive lineman, but if you constantly chase needs, those needs change every year. You have no sense in team building. To me, I thought this was one of the better Raiders drafts I've seen in a long time, on one of the better Raiders off seasons. Go back to the signing of Gardner Minshew. What did they do with that? I don't think Gardner Minshew is great, but they at least protected themselves in case the draft board didn't fall to where they could get a quarterback. I think Tom Telesco has done a really smart, competent job as a GM coming in and saying, we're going to trust the board as it falls, and we're going to say, fine, maybe we're not going to be as great as fans want us to be this year, but we are going to build towards being a good team in 3 years. When's the last time that happened? Patient team building with the Raiders. So I think it was a smart move.
Yeah, having a long-term plan in Las Vegas for the Raiders feels very strange and new. So I'm excited for you on that front. Jason, I want to talk to you about team building on the college level. You and I obviously spent a lot of time covering college football together at ESPN. What did you make of the comments from Brian Kelly the other day about the LSU use of the transfer portal here? He was asked, I think, specifically about defensive tackle on their team coming off of spring football, and said, we're not in the market of buying players. Unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought. If you like all the things we do here in developing our players, bringing you into a championship championship program, playing in front of the best fans in America, playing for championships, and having an opportunity for NIL, you should be a Tiger. But if you just want to get paid, this is not the place for you. What did you make of that?
Well, look, everybody can say that, and it's fine and dandy. But the minute there's pressure to win, that changes. I go back to Jed Fish, the head coach, who at the time, last year, remember, at Arizona had a really good season. And I talked to him on National Signing Day about the use of the transfer portal. And the first thing he said to me is, I don't want to use it. I'm never going to use it because I want players that I've gotten to know through the high school process. I want players that I've gotten to know by talking to their families. I don't want to correct other people's mistakes. I want to bring my guys in slow over time and build my roster the right way. Well, that's a great concept at Arizona, but the minute he gets to Washington, you think he's not sitting there using the phones and saying, hey, need some help, got to win right now. Like, expectations change all of these big statements that coaches make. So it's cute to come in right now and say, we're not going to buy players. But for that fan base, if they see Alabama buy players and they see Georgia buy players, and by players, I don't mean actually buy. I should stress, like, it's rewarding the best players in the country that choose to pick your university. And if you want to be out of the pool of the best players in the country, you better be damn sure that you can coach up lesser talent, because you will not have the same talent in the room.
I don't even think it's cute. I don't even think it's cute to say. It doesn't make sense to say it. This is not the era we're in right now. Would you rather not do that? Yes. But look again, Nick Saban is out of this game because of the changes that have happened between the portal and NIL. What do guys want to get paid? Yeah, that's where we are. You know, guys want to get paid. And if you are just going to say, I'm not dealing with that, then you're going to fall by the wayside. If you're going to just, I still agree that recruiting the 18-year-olds can be a lifeblood, but not as much, because you're going to recruit an 18-year-old that you're going to want to develop in a year or two in. He's going to want to go somewhere because someone else is willing to pay him. So to me, I'm sorry, it's not even cute to say. This is the new game. You can't sit there and pick and choose and say, well, I'm not going to do it this way. And Brian Kelly's 62. He's been doing this a long time and maybe is resistant to this, but you have got to change with the times.
But I think he has. Like, I think we do need to differentiate between buying players and paying players, because I'm sure LSU, they've got a collective down there. They're paying guys. Like, everyone is in big time college football now. And the reason Brian went to LSU is because he thought it would be a better resourced option and an opportunity for him to win a national championship. I'm sure they're paying guys, but to me, buying players is more about paying over market value. And you guys know this as well as anybody. Coaches love using the pulpit to go and try and send a message. This to me feels like it's probably a more specific instance where he's trying to communicate either to a group of players they were potentially in the market for, or the fan base that, hey, we're not going to go over what we think these guys are valued at certain positions here. And you can debate, I think, that, like, everyone's paying him. I think that ship has sailed. And I don't think that's what he's been around too long and has been too good at this to be insinuating that they're out of the paying players game altogether. But I think that next step is, all right, how far are you willing to go? And I think most people's estimation of LSU as a program is, well, yeah, that's no issue down there. This is one of the serious programs about winning, about recruiting, and about the way they approach this. And so I think that was a little bit surprising, but I think, like a lot of other things, this is probably a more specific message than it's being billed as publicly.
So then let's wait to see, when he does overpay somebody, then when that comes back to haunt him. I just think you put yourself in a box by saying that and just say, hey, the times, you just have to roll with the times. We'll take each individual case differently. But he put himself in a box saying what he said. And at some point, he's probably going to overpay somebody, and that's going to come back to bite him.
Also, is this the time to be mitigating expectations at LSU? Like, Alabama's definitely going to take a step back. This feels to me like the time to be selling to your entire fan base, hey, we're all in. We're all in to take the next step up. And whatever all in actually means, we can debate. But if I'm Brian Kelly, I'm selling roses right now to everybody, saying, hey, this is our real shot.
Well, all in looks like what Ohio State is doing right now. If you want a picture of what all in looks like, it's going on in Columbus, Ohio right now, because that thing is building a Death Star. And you're right, Jason, a tremendous opportunity for LSU while Alabama looks like they could be a little bit vulnerable. And while there's some changing tides around the SEC, someone else looking very vulnerable right now, though, is you, friend. The clock is ticking on your Kiss Track rebuttal. Thank you, as always, for your time. But go get to work, man. We're all waiting on bated breath, trying to figure out what you're going to do here.
I got to figure out how to show, a semi-pro how it's done. That's all. Can I say that before Kiss Track?
I was just going to say, it's about being nice. What are we doing here? Oh,
Not doing it right.
At Jason Fitz on Twitter. Check him out over at Yahoo Sports. Thanks, buddy. Get out of here.
GoJo and Golic with the Cavs and Mavs looking to even their series tonight. Cavs visiting TD at 7, and then at 9:30 I will be sleeping and I will watch in the morning Mavs versus the Thunder. Cavs, like I said, looking to even this series. Donovan Mitchell scored 33 himself, but the rest of the team failed to show up on really both sides of the floor, so he was asked about what they're going to do heading into Game 2.
Continue to get into the paint and create, but we've gotten some good looks and missed. You know what I mean? Like especially tonight, we got 43s up and we only hit 11. You know what I mean? So we're getting the looks. I think the biggest thing now is just being able to hit and knock them down. We had 95 today, but just continue to get into the paint and. They're a good team. You know what I mean? When they make shots, still continuing to get out and push the pace and get our looks. But biggest thing is we got to hit shots.
And it's impressive to keep the Cavs under 100 points, but we know it's really their defense that's their strong suit. So I think more impressive that the Celtics got 120, even with Tatum just putting up 18 points, Senior.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's right. They got to hit their shots. But also, while Porzingis is out, and there's talk that if the series went long enough, he could come back. But if they stay in control of the series, there's obviously no need to do it. For Cleveland, it's can they get Jared Allen back, right? He's missed his 4th straight game, has the rib injury. They were out-rebounded by almost 20. I think it ended up being out-rebounded by 17 by the Celtics. So they can't hit the board. Celtics are getting second chances and more opportunities. So that, to me, they're already not the better team. Boston's the better team, and then you're out without your big man. So if Jared Allen get back and help this, if not, I think either way, Boston's going to win this thing. It's just a matter of how many games.
I mean, Jared Allen's only going to help you so much defending the perimeter where Boston's been particularly lethal. I saw our friends over at Oddball, Amin El Hassan, had the stat yesterday that was mind-blowing, that when Derek White attempts 12 threes in a game, no matter how many of them he makes, just when he attempts 12 threes in a game, the Celtics are riding a 21-game winning streak at the moment. They are volume shooters pouring it in from the perimeter. They are the next in the line of the teams that we have seen weaponize the three-point shot in a way that becomes overwhelming. And when you combine that with their depth, it reminds me of when I was in college. This series, when I used to go and play, a buddy of mine named Anthony, who was a linebacker on our team, I would go play NBA 2K with Anthony. I did this for years at Notre Dame. And he would absolutely roll over me with the Golden State Warriors, draining threes from everywhere, getting them in all the time, and I had to work so hard for every bucket. Years later, he told me that before we would come over and play games, he would switch the difficulty so that I or whoever was playing against him would be on All NBA and he would be on Rookie. So it was like shooting into the ocean for him. That is what it looked like watching game one of this series between the Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers, where everything the Cleveland Cavaliers did looked hard to come by. Every Donovan Mitchell shot was some incredible feat of acrobatics. It was like the Knicks' entire ethos in one player. And on the other side, the Celtics were just whipping that thing around, chucking it up, and everything was going in. And Dad, with the parts that make it up, I struggle to see that difficulty level changing too much for Boston in this series.
I don't either. I mean, what are we talking about in this series? We ended up always talking about Jason Tatum and what he's doing, going forward. Is he going to be able to lead this team even when they win? That always seems to be the talk and probably will continue. You look at Cleveland, their last 13 playoff games this year and last year, they're 5-8, and 10 of those games they didn't even score 100 points. So this is not going to be the threat that's really, I think, going to push Boston. I think we're all looking forward to the Boston Knicks series down the road a little bit as we get through this second round. So yeah, I just don't see it with Cleveland.
Well, I want to ask Claudia, are we? Because this is the interesting tension to me is Celtics fans, despite how overwhelming their team has been, do seem to kind of live in fear. We've talked about the discourse around Jason Tatum and the worries about clutch time stuff all season long for a team that has been record-wise and accomplishment-wise the unquestioned best in basketball, even if people have looked west for what that team actually is. But Claudia, as you and Boston Celtics fans sit here now watching this Knicks team scrap it out with a ferocity unknown to mankind, with a clear dog in Jalen Brunson leading the charge here, but who is bleeding out currently on the floor with one player after another going down with injury, how nervous are you? Because if the Knicks are able to draw blood at all in that Boston series, and God forbid they take that anywhere close to the distance, I feel like that's going to be some real soul searching going on for that Celtics team if they somehow bleep the bed.
I'm scared, Michael. I really am.
Okay, there we go.
The fact that the Heat without Jimmy could at least get one from us worried me. And now you have this Knicks squad that even if Brunson is out at some point, everything comes together. When you talked about those stats of the big men shooting and assisting, leading an assist, like that's scary stuff that I'm almost a little worried about. Not so much a Joe Mazzulla thing, but the players in general. They seem so set in their ways. Are they going to be able to adjust to a team like the Knicks that seems to always show you something different every night? And yeah, you're right. If it's not this year, when is it going to be? They'd have to blow it up, you would think.
I listen, I love watching the Knicks. I love watching Brunson, but Mike, I just can't see the stamina staying, right? With the lack of bench, the lack of rotation, as much as these guys are playing and starting to get nicked up. I mean, obviously this series, I think they get through. But man, I mean, I get it if you're a Celtic fan, you worry, but me, I'm not. I don't care who wins or loses.
Well,
I'm looking forward to that series, obviously. But I just think the sands in that hourglass are kind of running out on New York from a stamina and actual people you can put on the court to do anything as the playoffs go on.
I think you're right, though, Mike. This is a situation where if they do end up facing the Knicks, it's going to be the fans, and that's going to be the talk. It's the energy around both teams and what the Celtics could be if they had a leader with the energy and the dog that Jalen Brunson has, just how different this team could be.
Well, and I think you said the perfect comparison. They are the Giga Miami Heat. Like at this point, the Miami Heat were not the fullest version of themselves this season. Having Jimmy Butler off the court went a long way in that series, but all the things they represent, gritty, tough defense, this commitment to, playing extended minutes, Heat culture, all of that is what the Knicks are built of under Tom Thibodeau. And so it makes it really interesting. On the other side, as we've got that game you mentioned there, I think it's sort of the opposite. Now, I don't want to fully dismiss Dallas, but seeing Luka limp around in game one a lot against a team that just has as much energy and can throw wave after wave, it's a similar problem we've talked about Boston presenting or the Timberwolves presenting is what OKC does. And Dad, the more I think about it, the best Western Conference series we could get coming off this would be Timberwolves and Oklahoma City. Two teams committed on the defensive end, led by young superstars here that seem to be healthy and able to throw those waves at you after is the Western Conference Finals that we deserve.
Listen, I think both conference finals, Boston, New York, I think Minnesota and Oklahoma City, I think where we're heading, I think is going to be very exciting to watch. I love those two teams in the West with the young stars that they have and all the energy that they have and the fun that they have. Yeah, I think that's going to be enjoyable. We just have to get there. I don't see Dallas with the ability. Now watch, we say that Luke will have a monster game and they'll be right back in this thing, but I just don't know about sustaining it with the bad knee that he has.
Yeah, we saw Luka come back in the second half in the prior series and turn it on after it looked like, hey, the injuries were starting to mount up too much. He's a little bit too beat up along the way. He's capable of stringing it together. I just think on the other side, and I know it was at home. I know home games, the role players all tend to play better, all that stuff. OKC's done a phenomenal job of making that place an absolute hellscape to go into as an opposing team. But for a young team, every time Dallas started to make a run, every time they tried to knock Chet Holmgren around on the interior, they had an answer. They had something for them there, and your guys were all able to step up in those big moments. And I just feel like that coupled with the energy that comes with youth. Like, I don't know if this is me settling into bracing for my back every morning as a 34-year-old and watching some of these older teams go by the wayside as guys get dinged up. Not to say that Luka's an old man, but to say on the other side, you're dealing with the true energy of a team that has not been here before. They don't have all those postseason miles on them, and they've been going all season long.
Yeah, I think one of the best stats for me, and one of the most frustrating ones if you're playing against them, is when you get turned over. And right now, Oklahoma City is plus 52 in the category of points off turnovers. And that is just a damning stat and a frustrating stat if you're on the other side of it.
Coming up next, we know the saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, we watched someone get repeatedly punched in the face last night. We'll check in on see how he's doing next.
D, we saw the Panthers even the series last night with the Bees. A punch back, figuratively and literally, with the fights on the ice, which we will get to. A 6-1 win for Florida after the 5-1 game win for the Bees. In game one for the Oilers and Canucks, third period comeback, 5-4 win for the Canucks. To talk all things playoffs, we're joined by Bleachers Report Sara Civian. Sara, I have to say, despite the bad loss for the Bees, seeing Pasta drop the gloves with Tkachuk was a thing of beauty.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if we have her because
Sarah,
I can't see.
unfortunately, you're muted right now. We don't want to lose all these great takes.
Oh, we got her.
There we go.
All right, there we are.
Mediocre takes at best. You didn't miss a thing. But I think Tkachuk has everybody right where he wants them right now, including Pasta. Kind of cool to see him drop the gloves, but not his MO. So that was troubling for the Bruins at the least.
How do you level set this series coming off that, though? Claudia mentioned wild swing between game one and game two with this thing now evened up. How do you handicap it from here on out?
There are so many cliches, and one of them is there's no momentum in the playoffs, so you just completely shrug it off. I don't like that they pulled Swayman and went to Allmark because now you have that ace taken away, so you probably go back to Allmark for game three and just pretend it never happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that switching like that? I mean, how go inside the locker room? What can that do?
I think these two, Swaymark and Allman, wow, Swayman and Allmark, they're so close and they have such a good, unique relationship that doesn't matter. But the on-ice product is something you worry about. Like, you think you could maybe get an edge in the Panthers' heads if you're trying to say, like, okay, I can put a different goalie in and it's a different story, but that's not going to happen anymore. So you just have to, like, you've shown all your cards when you play both goalies.
A lot of cards up in that series and some fireworks there last night, but the late game there, Oilers and Canucks, the Oilers up 4-1 at one point, Vancouver comes storming back. How did they manage to turn the tide in that game? I had left them for dead.
I know, that's the story of the Canucks this year. I was up all night gloating as if I own the team for some reason. I just know that they're going to win these crazy games. Like, I don't know what it is about them, but they just always find a way in the third period. Like, never count them out until it's the third period.
Speaking of never count them out, how about Carolina? They're down 2-0 to the Rangers after a double overtime win. What are your thoughts on them trying to make a comeback in this?
Yeah, maybe count them out if they can't figure it out on the power play. Oh my goodness, they're 15 minutes power play like time, 0 goals, 10 shots, 4 high danger chances. Like, it's not. I think the Rangers are just too good. Like, they won the President's Trophy. We are like, for some reason, they weren't the betting favorites. I guess it's the 5-on-5 lack of oomph they have, but it doesn't matter if they keep scoring on the power play and keep thwarting teams on the penalty kill. And that's what they're doing. So it's just like, they seem unstoppable right now, but in Carolina, like, that's a different story. So I don't know. You don't lose the series until you lose a game at home, but It's looking bleak on special teams for the Hurricanes.
Sarah, I want to take a brief pause in the postseason here just because we had the news the other day. San Jose wins the lottery for the number 1 overall pick that we've got. And it seems like, by all accounts, the overwhelming answer for the number 1 pick is Macklin Celebrini. So what can you tell me about this guy? I was reading up a little bit. I know his dad's job with the Warriors and his background around pro sports because of that. But where does he compare to some of the recent number 1s, Connor Bedard from last year, that we've seen coming into the NHL lately?
It's funny because we had this same exact conversation about Bedard last year, and you're just kind of like, we've been spoiled by the Austin Matthews, the Connor McDavids of the world the past few years when it comes to the draft. And you're like expecting everybody to immediately translate, but Bedard did, and Celebrini will. Like, these guys are so good again. You had the youngest guy in the NCAA last year in Celebrini, and he made BU relevant. Like, he's the reason they went to the playoffs. He's just amazing. And he's San Jose is his hometown team. So it's kind of like destiny there. I don't know. Like, the Sharks are going to take a few years to be relevant again, but he is going to immediately go in there and make an impact. Like he's someone special.
You know, we've talked about in the NBA how as the older guard is moving on, that we're really impressed with the younger guard out there that's coming up, the younger players that are playing extremely well. Can we say the same in hockey? You just mentioned a number of younger players of how the game is in good hands because of how well these guys are coming in and playing right out of the gate.
Yeah, and in the NHL, there's more of a personality issue too, where like you need better personalities. And I feel like this is definitely happening with the younger guys in the league. Like you see them with the suits in the draft lottery. Like I think it's in good hands in multiple ways. Like they are bringing the personality edge, and there's been a lot of relevant number 1 overall draft picks recently. You have Alexis Lafreniere with the Rangers right now, who scored 2 goals last game. Like he's really stepping up. He was the 2021 number 1 overall draft pick, and he had been up and down. Like, is he going to do it? But after a few years, he's been really, really effective for the Rangers, and he's the reason they're in the position they're in right now.
Sarah, I posted a video about the Bruins the other day talking about how there's decent value right now. They're plus 950 to win the cup. And I understand maybe they don't have all the pieces together. This isn't the best conversation to have coming off of last night. But as we know, there's going to be swings. There's going to be ebbs and flows. And I loved also when you said Allmark and Swayman together, because they're basically a couple. So you can almost give them that name and it actually would work fine. But again, the spirit of the team, I feel like they're in it. So it feels a little disrespectful to look at the odds and say plus 950. It feels long to me, especially when we go back to goaltending. And like baseball, pitching, the most important. Here, goaltending is the most important. That's what matters down the stretch. So do you see any value with Boston at this point, or anybody else at the bottom of the board?
Absolutely, the Bruins are a good call. I mean, obviously you don't like game 2, but it's one game and there's no momentum in the playoffs, as we say. So I think game 3 is going to be a huge indicator if they can go all the way or not. Like the Panthers are one of the best teams in the league, but I like those 950 odds. The Rangers don't have great odds to win the cup either, and they're one of the best teams in the league, so I'd go with them or the Bruins for sure.
I was just going to say, looking at the top, there's so much parity. The Rangers and Avs are plus 425, Panthers plus 450. So basically odds makers at DraftKings are saying, we don't know, everyone's looking pretty good at the top.
It's so funny when I try to gamble on basketball or something. It's like, what's even the point? Because you gamble on the NHL and there's so many better odds and better chances of winning. It's like, I'm sticking with that.
Yeah. Just bet in game. It's more fun anyways.
That too.
Sarah, only about a minute left here looking at the games tonight. You mentioned the Rangers and Carolina, but Colorado going back and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat as Dallas got up early in that one. How big a missed opportunity from that was that for Dallas, and can they bounce back tonight?
My goodness. The Avalanche seem like a team of destiny, just with the amount of clutch players, the battle-testedness of the team, getting past the Jets that rinsed them 0-4 in the regular season, I think was huge. And Nathan McKinnon said that himself. He was like, once we got past them, anything feels possible. They are another one, just like the Canucks with the comeback. So I don't know if you guys are looking for a third period bet. It's the Canucks or the Avalanche. But the Stars are so consistent that, I mean, the way they grinded the Vegas Golden Knights down in the first round, that's going to be a series that might go to 7 again. They aren't the flashy team that's going to win, but they have the most consistency down their lineup to make something happen and to push the series. So, I mean, if there's one team I'm not counting out that has lost, it's definitely the Dallas Stars.
Excited to check out more of that action coming up tonight. We'll see if anyone else gets punched in the face repeatedly. Sarah, thank you as always for the time, friend. Enjoy the games tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
Of course.
Thanks,
See ya.
Sarah.
Again, you guys can check out Sarah and read her over at Bleacher Report Open Ice there. Doing a great job as always there. So, Claudia, you trying to hold on hope, it sounds like, with the Bruins.
Hey, man, I'm just saying there's value. That's all.
Copium. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. And check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Tell somebody else to do the same. You can also check us out here, Best of GoJo and Golic, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. But if you miss any of us live or there, or any of our great guests, shout out to Jason Fitz and Sara Civian, both joining us today to help talk a little bit of music, a little bit of college football, and a lot of hockey. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast, or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. And lo and behold, in the week where Austin Rivers lights the internet on fire with a conversation about people going from basketball to football, football to basketball, the universe gives us a little bit of manna from heaven. Devin Funchess, the former wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, signed a contract to play professional basketball with the Caribbean Storm Llaneros as part of the Baloncesto Professional Colombiano. But that's besides the point, Dad. A professional football player going and making the transition to professional basketball, like it's even hard.
This is awesome. I mean, I love the goal. What was it with his grandfather that he had, where he had 3 goals of winning a Super Bowl, playing professional basketball, and being a farmer. Those were the 3 goals. And his rookie year in Carolina, they almost got there. He didn't win, and obviously never got close after that. He's looking to do a tryout for the NBA G League teams, a couple of them down the road. So this works perfectly into our conversation of basketball to football, or football to basketball, to see what he can do here.
Does he just have a really good PR team? And they were like, we're going to plant this, get everybody talking about it, and then we're going to have you sign. Because I just looked to check the date. Yeah, May 8th. So the timing's impeccable, but also suspect.
Hey, you know what? We always got to have our tinfoil hats on when it comes to this stuff. That being said, because of the timing now, everyone in the footballing community, we need to rally our energy and our spiritual energy around Devin Funchess right now. When that tryout comes up in September, he's putting on for all of us right now. That was a shot across. Austin Rivers, he didn't just posit the argument. He came out there with a lot of sass, and we need to make sure that we resoundingly block that shot into the student section and let him know it's not sweet out here like that when it comes to football players. The other upside of that whole debate yesterday was I saw so many basketball players, hoops highlights hitting my timeline. I saw Cooper DeJean dunk over every white person. Is he from Iowa originally? I don't know. Wherever he is, there are no black people playing basketball, because he dunked over the milkiest sea of white bread I have ever seen in my life over and over again in that highlight reel.
I mean, we'll see what he does. He's 6'4", playing small forward position right now in age of basketball. I think it is right now, but we'll see. Obviously, he played it in high school, but you're right. This is going to be a very, very watched young man as he tries out in the G Leagues.
He'll be the most bet on player in that league.
Point of parliamentary procedure. What's that?
He will be the most bet on player in that league, because you can bet that league, by the way.
Exactly. And everyone be very careful with that. Devin Funchess, you don't need to be betting on yourself in that league.
Yes.
Let's learn from Michael Porter Jr.'s brother in that. By the way, Port of Parliamentary Procedure, Cooper DeJean is of the Sioux Falls varietal of whites. So those are the young men that he was dunking over repeatedly in those videos. Claudia, let's get to that. More cross-sports action here, as we've got someone deciding to go back to college in a way that, listen, we all love the idea of going back to college, but man, this seems like an interesting career choice for Monty Harrison.
Yeah, if you're 28 years old out there and you still want to go back, you can, because Monty Harris did. He went from Major League Baseball to college football. It's been less than 2 years since he had his last MLB appearance with the Angels, and now he's planning to walk on at Arkansas as a receiver. He's 28. He was a 4-star recruit who committed to Nebraska as part of the class of 2014, but then the Brewers drafted him in the second round of the 2014 draft. So then he played baseball. Now he's done with baseball. Wants to go back to football. I feel like they have to fix the rules here, GoJo. This feels weird.
It does.
This is like when we get those like 60-plus-year-old dudes going to play back at D3 schools and we get the hilarious shots of them in pads at picture day. This one will look a little more right because this guy's fresh off of being a professional athlete. Now, with limited exposure in that league, I think he had only something like 57 career MLB at bats. But, Dad, this is very Australian of him. Like, usually when we see a 28-year-old going back to college, it's some Australian punter who was doing roofing over in his country, leaving his wife and kids to come mash punts in America through Pro Kick Australia. This one a little bit more different. I just always want to know what it's like. Like, what are you talking to these 21-year-olds about in the locker room? I wasn't 28 that long ago, and you'd really, like, the age gap at that point is exponential, and you're walking into a locker room full of TikToks and stuff that are probably a bit outside of your purview.
Yeah, with the Aussie punters too. Now you look at some of them; they're built pretty damn well. Like the punter Notre Dame got, like 6'6", 2.25. But for the most part, they don't have to go hit anybody either. They're not involved in the contact of the game. This guy's going to be, and you're right. He had 57 at bats. He hit 176. So it didn't work out for him there. But you go back to his senior year at Lee's Summit West High in Missouri, and he had 60 catches for over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns, as Claudia mentioned, signed possibly to play with Nebraska and then got drafted by Milwaukee. So he's living on that, man. But going to be interesting when you start taking those first hits at 28 years old, how the old body reacts when you haven't done that in a while.
You know what? If he had just gone to BYU, none of this would even be a story, and we wouldn't notice his age sticking out on the roster at all. So this is just the difference in going down to the SEC. It just means more. Claudia, let's get to the third here. Anthony Edwards, ever the media darling during this postseason run, giving us even more.
Yes, well, we're all impressed by Anthony Edwards. He is not impressed by the Nuggets. He was asked if there's anyone on the team, anybody that he's impressed by like he was with Kevin Durant in round one, and this is what he said.
Nah, these guys 3-4 years older than me, man, yeah.
I mean, Jamal been around for a minute. Is that a guy that you've been tracking at all?
Nah, hell nah. Like I said, he what is he, 27?
I think so.
I'm finna turn 23, dog. Yeah, KD 36, 35, yeah. Come on, man. There's no disrespect to Jamal. I don't know what you're trying to start, but yeah, he's no.
He's going to throw a rock on the court now. I mean, these are fighting words. Senior, what do you think about this?
But I mean, so basically what he's saying is anybody within his age range, he's not giving any sort of, no, I'm not looking up to them. Now, Jokic is 29, so it's a couple years older than Jamal Murray. But it just seems like he's going to the old guard, like he said, KD's 35, 36. So guy coming to the end of the career. I kind of listen. You got to have a lot of thoughts about your ability in to the point of being cocky about it. And he's basically saying, listen, I'm not including anybody who's basically within 5 years or so of my age range. They can look up to me. I'm not looking up to them. But you give me those mid-30 and up guys, okay, they're about at the end of their career. I can say I'm impressed with what they did.
Exactly. When you see more similarities than differences, and you're right, when you didn't grow up watching someone on TV the way that he did, the tone starts to be a little bit different. I saw a great video yesterday of Bradley Beal speaking to a team that Anthony Edwards was playing when he was a lot younger. And at one point, Bradley Beal addressing those guys, asking them about their thoughts about their NBA futures, basically kind of went the route some guys do where it's like, hey, it's a man's game. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and none of you are coming in to take my job. And you just see Anthony Edwards in the back with that sort of wry smirk that seems to beget exactly what we've seen from that dude's career as he sent Bradley Beal and the Suns packing in the last round and now looks poised to do it to the defending champions right now. Dad, I don't know about you. I just wish I was ever as good at anything as this guy is, even close to it as Anthony Edwards, because to be able to go and say all this with a straight face and back it up has to be an incredible feeling.
I mean, it just goes to show, even at the top level, there is a distinguishing line between the great players and everybody else, and he is there. And I love how even at 23, he didn't fall into the trap of getting caught up when the guy mentioned Jamal Murray. He even said, "What are you trying to start, man? Not going down that road. Just get out, not doing it."
22. I'm going to give him every bit of credit on that. He'll be 23 in August, and in the meantime, we are dealing with a 22-year-old superstar firmly across that line you just mentioned. If you think we're across that line, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review the pod, and tell us so. Leave us a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. Enjoy the games. We'll talk to you tomorrow.